Hey, good evening. It's Sandy Shellis with Environmental Coffeehouse, and I have an interesting show tonight. I think we'll wait and see who joins us. I hope that Kim, you're here, Kim Centino. Hi, going south from Greenland. It's good to see you guys. I'm glad that you're here with me. All right, so I'm going to get started as long as you can hear me. Good enough. We're gonna get started. So I called it the aftermath tonight. And good evening, Karen. Oh my. To what do I have this pleasure? She's staying up late. Can't deal. You're part of the show tonight. I got to make sure I have it up, actually. Okay, so when I need it. Okay, so we did the show on the little bit of the controversy between the article that was written about deep adaptation and basically is it full of shit? Is it something that is I don't think I need to fix this. Is it something that's detrimental to people? We talked about the writers, and basically, me, Jennifer, and I, we try to give a fair and balanced viewpoint in what we do. I think we do that. I do think we do that. And let me say hi to David Alcock and hi Vegematic. All right, this is so cool. All right, everybody's joining. Kim, if you're here, Santino, I cannot share. Another thing Facebook is doing is what they won't let me share to a group more than once. So if I share the stream out once, it's that you're done. It just doesn't do it for me, at least on on the phone part. So it's like I think they must have me on some kind of mechanism block. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, Facebook, funny. So I'm going to start out with why I'm calling this the aftermath. And then I do have articles to talk about. I do have quite a few things to pull up on this whole situation, which probably I'm not putting to bed yet. What can I say? So I thought I'd show you. Oh, you got it, Kim. You'll do it to Environmental Coffee House. Yay! All right. So I'm also having a lot of trouble with my arms, probably emanating from my neck. So if I drop my coffee, I have to hold it with two hands. I don't know if I could do it with this hand, whatever the hell that means. All right, so Kim, I love you. Everybody's here. All right, I'm going to start out with this. Let's build up a crowd. I'm not going to get nearly anybody like Kevin gets because he has the same show 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's a terrific show. So every day, what does he do? 7 days a week, and I'm trying to do this 2 nights a week, but definitely with with Jennifer. All right, so let me get started. I want to show you an image. There was a commenter that afterwards, after we did our thing, this person, let me see if this is the right one. Is this the right one? Okay, here it is. All right, here we go. Hi, boiled rope lamppost. So I'm going to read you this because I thought it was quite interesting. Bell, one for you. So she called herself Bell, one for you. Okay. These gals do not understand the science well enough to make a clear argument for or against the science and deep adaptation agenda agenda by Jem Bendell, and that is obvious. The bad science comes from NTHE, that guy of cult doom strikes again. We didn't mention him once. Not once. And she says, LOL, which is completely bogus. And this is already known by anyone with the ability to do math, specifically statistics and physics. And by the way, I did statistics for many years to do the affirmative action report at the college because that is a statistical analysis. So screw you. Anyway, then she goes, well, this includes Sam Carana, because he, she, it cannot do the math here either. And it is a conspiracy that they are creating in their online followings with absurd calculations and manipulated, let me get the second one up, manipulated graphs and numbers. Now, Jennifer likes the work that comes out on the Facebook. Some of the graphs from Sam Carana are from other verified sites. And I guess he shares articles. Again, he, she, it, whatever. So graphs and numbers. If you take a university course in this topic, you will learn this in your first lecture. Schools are teaching students to avoid this online myth and conspiracy community and its junk science. Is that what you are spreading here? Myths and lies and conspiracies? Sandra Amy of Environmental Coffeehouse. Is that who you are? I thought you were better than this. Meanwhile, I don't even know who Belle what the fuck is. Her name is. It is clear that you are not doing the right math. And this is about math and physics, not your feelings or beliefs. Then she put in, which I actually liked, she put in the a saying from Terence McKenna, which I will read to you, because this I actually liked out of this. And then I used it today on the Facebook page because it was so good that I thought it merited a wonderful space. I even pinned it to the top. The apocalypse is not something which is coming. The apocalypse has arrived in major portions of the planet, and it's only because we live within a bubble of incredible privilege and social insulation that we still have the luxury of anticipating the apocalypse. And I thought that was a marvelous comment by Terence McKenna. And I represented, I suppose, I will never sit there and say that I haven't had a Western privileged life. How could I ever say that? I mean, that would be hypocritical and very untrue. Gosh, out of all people, I really feel like, and I'm not defending myself, but I don't bullshit about who I am or what my life was like. I just feel like, why bother? But anyway, this person was angry. And it's okay, though. But are we a cult? I have to examine my own motivations quite frequently. And there was another gal who I have respect for that was on YouTube. I mean, not YouTube, that went on Facebook, but right on to the show. And she made similar comments about the science, but I really don't think it would be this gal who would put a bullshit thing up, because this is what happened when I went back to look for Bell One For You. Bell One For You, here's one for you. Anyway, so Bell One For You, just thanks for creating this persona. But you know what? I'm approachable, Belle, or whoever the hell you are. And what I did here was I entered in a conversation on Paul Beckwith's page, his group on Facebook with Belle. And I said, well, Belle, if you know more science, or if you understand the science, I mean, what's your background? And then I invited her to come on the show with me. I said, gee, I think it's... Am I buffering? Rich said I'm buffering. Excuse me, it's not COVID. All right. So I invited her to come on. And I wrote to her, I said, I would be more than happy to have you come on with me if you are knowledgeable in this area. I've never said I was a scientist. I'm a citizen scientist. And I like to report about stories that interest us in our community of, if you want, what do you want to call us? Doomers. That's what they're calling us. Doomers, collapseniks, whatever. We're people, at least I'm a person, I look at all options. And that includes where we're going to go for the next year, 2, 4, whatever. Solution focused. I don't know if I would use the word solution, because that's saying that we're not in a predicament. And I'm certainly not going to, I'm not going to, belabor the the writers of the article. I'm not going to do that too much, but anyway, yeah, I'm, first of all, I like to debunk cults and all. Mike says I sound like coffee. No, I had a reason to cough. Oh my God, I gotta get this chair up a little bit. Okay, I had a reason to cough. Okay, as long as I'm going, let's see what I got out. What else I got to pull up? I have quite a bit to pull up, and it isn't. You don't have to worry about me with this. It's really it's allergies crap. It's not. I feel fine. So I guess whoever Belle was, she took herself off after I invited her to be with me and teach me what she knew in science, because wow, I was kind of thrilled. I enjoy people that call me out or feel like they're trying to get under my skin. It's not that. If you have something to say it. I'm approachable. Anybody else will tell you I'm approachable. In fact, the gal on Facebook, not that Belle, the other gal, I exchanged my phone number with her, and I said, listen, if you have something to help me with, I'm all open to learn. Lifelong learning. Oh, you did? I have to look at Going South's blog. Okay, cool. We'll look at it. I don't usually get involved in the muck and mire, but I have an interesting one to read, and it was because I was specifically called out by Belle Fuck You, or whatever her name was, and then I found a few articles. I have quite a few things, and I'm not going to read them all. I'm not, but this one was a pretty good one. This was from July 24th, and I'm going to as long as you can hear me well, no bells and whistles here. This is by Richard Heinberg, and I've heard of Richard Heinberg. He is the author of 13 books, One Renewable Future, Laying the Path for 100% Clean Energy, Afterburn, Snake Oil. So the guy is reputable. He's written in Counterpunch. He's alternate. He's somebody that we can trust, I think, for this article. So let's go. And I want to make it, I don't want to belabor it. I have so much. And I don't want to be on all night because I feel like I'm losing my voice. And that's not a good thing. So I was recently asked to comment on a dust-up between some members of Extinction Rebellion, and that was Thomas Nicholas, Galen Hall, and Colin Schmidt, the authors of the article, and Jem Bendell, founder of Deep Adaptation. For those not familiar, Jem's Deep Adaptation takes its starting point the judgment that because of unfolding human-induced climate impacts, the near-term utter collapse of society is nearly inevitable. So XR is an activist movement, and they use civil disobedience to compel government action to avoid climate tipping points. Now, you guys, pretty much, we can go through the rest of that. You all know who's what. Jennifer, are you with us tonight? Jennifer, I wrote her about 42 Jennifer Elizabeth. Hi. Okay. Well, I wrote to my Jennifer, but she was busy working, and she could come on if she wanted to. I would send her a Skype. But anyway, so the nub of the controversy is some folks involved in Extinction Rebellion think that Bendell is being too fatalistic, thereby discouraging his followers from taking actions that might still save civilization and global ecosystems. Bendell, in his response, accuses his critics of ignoring evidence and misrepresenting his views. Now, I went through all of the Twitter stuff that was on scientists warning, and it was pretty interesting. I read all of Tom's, the kid, I can't say the kid. That's so like terrible. I'm such an old lady. Thomas's Twitter account, and he basically made a gazillion tweets, which was the article actually, in his justification. So after years of studying, he says, of course, he says, some form of societal collapse is indeed highly probable this century, depending on how we define collapse. Quite a few environmental scientists with whom I'm acquainted agree with this assessment. With regard to climate change, the problem is not that global warming has already proceeded too far to be reined in. On that point, he says, I'm agnostic. I agree with the XR authors that the science is not yet settled, and they make some good points in this regard. But rather, it's the things we would have to do to minimize climate change would undermine industrial societies by other means. That last statement requires some substantiation. The only realistic way to minimize climate change is to stop burning fossil fuels. And in my judgment, there is no way to do that without shrinking energy usage and therefore economic activity. I've explained my reasoning on this point elsewhere. Repeating it here would make this essay overlong. So continuing to be dependent on fossil fuels likewise leads to economic contraction, because aside from the fact that they are destabilizing the climate, these are depleting non-renewable resources that we have extracted using the low-hanging fruit principle. What's left of them will be increasingly expensive to get, both in monetary and energetic terms. And energy is the ultimate driver of the economy. With less of it available, manufacturing and trade will necessarily contract. So one way or another, we must accept economic degrowth. However, we don't know how to degrow our economy controllably, particularly in the context of a massive global debt bubble. Moreover, the structures of representative democracy, which respond to the short-term concerns of the electorate, make planning for degrowth even harder. For decades, policymakers have promised only more growth, and economists have turned logical somersaults, providing rationales for why growth in energy and materials usage can continue forever on a finite planet. We all know that can't happen. Since we are unprepared for sustained economic contraction, we are unlikely to handle it well. Moreover, global warming isn't our only sustainability crisis. Others include resource depletion, worsening environmental pollution, a food system that ruins topsoil and destroys biodiversity, the overuse of debt as a way to transfer consumption from the future to the present, worsening economic inequality leading to political destabilization and increasing overpopulation and overconsumption, especially by the rich. Justified and encouraged by the flawed belief that the earth will always be able to support more people consuming more resources on a per capita basis. Further, the complex interactions of known system stressors, let alone the unknown ones, they make matters worse. Climate change worsens economic inequality, while social instability due to increasing inequality makes it harder for national leaders to focus their attention on climate change. Similarly, the growing crisis of democracy around the world, with the rich and powerful feeling insulated from danger and blocking needed change, are a threat multiplier, making it harder for societies to deal with any of these problems. So, in sum, we have created a fundamentally unsustainable way of living. Well said. In recent decades, as more problems have arisen, we have learned to rely on fossil fuel economic growth to solve them. But now growth is just making the problems worse. And we have no other plan. pointing all of this out is not an effective way to win friends and influence people. And that leads us to the core of XR's argument. So let's suppose the totality of the evidence favors Bendell's conclusion, and I believe that it does, with a few caveats. XR's criticism is that if the people who are most aware of the climate crisis and thus likely to drive change consciously accept the near certainty of collapse, this will lead to inaction and cynicism on their part, which will only worsen the situation. That criticism must still be answered. So one way of responding is to redefine collapse. Past civilizations have collapsed, and usually the process took 2 or 3 centuries and eventually led to some sort of renaissance. We see similar cycles of buildup and release in ecosystems. Resilience scientists describe this universal tendency in terms of the adaptive cycle. I really like this article. I don't know how big, if you can see, there's reorganization, conservation, growth, exploitation, and collapse and release, and really little words. So you guys, you'll get the link. Collapse needn't imply that nearly everybody dies at once or that the survivors become wandering cannibals. Rather, it means our current institutions will fail to one degree or another, and we will have to find alternative ways to meet basic human needs, ways that are slower, smaller in scale, and more local. Even if we can't altogether avert the release phase of the adaptive cycle we're in, it may be within our power to modify how release and reorganization can occur. So perhaps if we think of collapse in those terms, accepting its near inevitability won't be so debilitating. But a happy version of collapse is likely to be realized only if we act. Past civilizations didn't have fossil fuels, hence climate change, or nuclear weapons. Without a great deal of luck and hard work, we might get a version of collapse that is indeed unsurvivable, or nearly so. Can we mentally accept that the odds are stacked against us, yet still act sanely and vigorously? That's a question that has dogged me for some time. I believe clues leading to an answer may come from a realm of psychology known as terror management theory, which Bendell discusses in Deep Adaptation's founding document. Non-human organisms appear not to be aware of the let me take a sip of my coffee. The inevitability of their own death, so they don't have to cope with that awareness. A few intelligent animals, including crows and elephants, take note of the deaths of their comrades, and they appear to mourn them. But we don't know if they are able to contemplate their own mortality. For us humans, though, usually beginning in late childhood, language and rational thought ensure that we inescapably know that everyone will die sooner or later, ourselves included. Knowledge of death creates a psychological conflict between our self-preservation instinct and our knowledge of our own eventual demise, as we as a species have gone to great lengths to overcome this conflict. This, according to terror management theory, explains a wide array of cultural beliefs and institutions that explicitly or implicitly promise immortality, including but not limited to religious teachings and rituals. As a result, denial has become a deeply entrenched human capacity. In their book, Denial, Self-Deception, False Beliefs, and the Origin of the Human Mind, Ajit Varki and Danny Brower suggest that as language evolved, our emerging expectation of personal extinction would have made us so depressed and cautious that we probably wouldn't have been able to compete successfully with other species or other members of our own species who were not so burdened. If for not the appearance of a simultaneous adaptation, our ability to deny death. Denial thus served an evolutionary function as an essential tool of terror management. Over time, our denial muscle strengthened, and it has arguably done so in recent decades as a great collective death via nuclear war or climate change has become a distinct possibility. Bye, Moose Gal. I'm sorry. I didn't even see. I haven't even looked at this. I've been reading this. Is like really, it's a really good one. So denial can take those several forms. One stems from the cognitive dissonance, the motivational mechanism that underlies the reluctance to admit mistakes or accept scientific findings when they contradict our existing views. Hence, those disciplined to believe in climate change go out of their way to seize upon any evidence, however flimsy, to support their opinion. Another is disavowal, a state in which we're aware of climate change and its facts, but find ways to remain undisturbed by its implications, rather than being stirred to actions. Like Jennifer said last night, if you're upset about it or disturbed about it, just go watch Netflix. Denial of climate change and the likelihood of societal collapse is therefore more than just a political tool for maintaining the corporate profits of the fossil fuel industry. It is a complex, collective coping mechanism. We're all in denial in various ways and degrees. The XR folks have a point. If we accept the inevitability of collapse, we could psychologically short-circuit our ability to make collapse survivable. However, if we indulge more in denial, we might blithely go our merry way, again doing nothing to improve our survival prospects. Is the solution to indulge in just the right amount of denial? What is that perfect quantity, and how should we go about monitoring everyone's dosage? There may be a sliding scale for how much doom each of us can handle, in which case the XR versus DA quarrel could at least partly be about groups of people sorting themselves according to their levels of psychological tolerance, then walling themselves off from one another through cognitive dissonance. Bingo! However, that assessment somewhat trivializes the debate. Yeah, okay. There's more going on here. Just one additional angle. Maybe collapse has already arrived, and it just isn't evenly distributed yet. Hundreds of millions, perhaps a couple of billion poor people around the globe are already experiencing many of the horrors that are likely to follow in the wake of the collapse of modern industrial societies. Not to mention the billions who have not benefited equally from or have been the victims of global industrial capitalism and imperialism. These people, whose plight is likely to worsen, they don't have the luxury of sitting back and philosophizing about the future. They spend each day doing what's necessary to survive, which sometimes means fighting back against the forces of capitalist exploitation, which usually coincide with the major causes of climate change. Perhaps deep adaptation followers are mostly privileged people whose bubble has been popped by awareness of climate change, and who, for the moment at least, can afford to be somewhat immobilized by this sudden disorientation. But I would counsel folks more inclined towards the DA point of view not to waste effort trying to convince their XR critics that catastrophic collapse is indeed inevitable within the next few years. Resist the pitfall of certitude. None of us knows at this point whether near-term human extinction is inevitable or whether concerted action could result in a relatively benign version of collapse. Instead, concentrate on areas of agreement, and join with XR critics in taking action, which, among other things, is an effective way of managing our terror. Reject the tendency toward navel-gazing stasis. Meanwhile, here's a bit of evidence to the XR critics of DA. Go easy. Despite its questionable tendency towards worst case fixation, DA nevertheless provides a support system within which people can undertake the inner work entailed in facing the reality of the great unraveling that is upon us. While the inner work shouldn't become an end in itself, thereby subverting the effort towards minimizing harm to ecosystems and human communities, it is nevertheless a necessary stage in moving beyond denial. Perhaps, and I'm reading this whole thing because it's almost over and I liked it. Perhaps the great classic of ancient Hindu literature, the Bhagavad Gita, has wisdom to offer in this regard. The Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is a dialogue between Prince Arjuna and his guide and charioteer Krishna, which occurs beside a battlefield during a war between Arjuna's kinsmen and another tribe. Arjuna is overwhelmed with moral dread about the violence and death, the utter doom of it all, and that his actions may contributed to it. Even though he believes his kinsmen are right, and he wonders if he should renounce his title and duty and devote himself to philosophizing, Krishna counsels Arjuna to fulfill his warrior obligation, but to act without thought of self or the attachment to outcome. And guys, isn't that what I say in every single stream? I talk about taking action, but don't get yourself so attached to the end result. Or you can't do that. You have to fight for what's now. And there are ways. Similarly, those of us with awareness of the crises ahead must understand that action will have largely unknowable about consequences. We find ourselves drawn to a role simply by the fact of our awareness. However, our awareness is incomplete. Despite that limitation, it's up to us to play our role in the defense of nature and humanity as cleanly and selflessly and effectively as possible. And it's like, can't we all just get along? Can we all get along? So I want to show you another thing that goes with this. And I'll look, and you look pretty busy in the chat. Thank you for being here with me. I hope you're enjoying this show. The next thing I want to show you is that Deep Adaptation, they do give you emotional support. They do give you the place to go. And I'm going to read a few of them because I've given you a few of these, and that's Carolyn Baker. And I will just quickly read, and I'll have the link in there. The Aching Heart Movement, Death Cafe Movement, the Positive Deep Adaptation Facebook group, the Near Term Human Extinction Support group on Facebook, which has nothing to do with what that Bell was mentioning. And there's one also with love in the title. The Deep Adaptation LinkedIn group, the Deep Adaptation Forum, Climate Psychology Alliance, the Reframing Collapse Facebook group. There is the Dark Mountain. I've read pieces from Paul Kingsnorth. Dark Mountain Network is also beginning to put people in direct touch with each other. And then there's the shows like Lifeboat Hour Podcast, Anything by Carolyn Baker, Videocast by Debo Zarko, who is our guest next week, Sunday night with me and Jennifer, and her book Beyond Hope. Roy Scranton's book Learning to Die in the Anthropocene, and another similar title review here. So there you go. You've got, and I've always, well, it was pretty neat, right? In one neat little thing. And the next article, and I'm not going to read anymore because I'm not going to read the long articles. I want to just discuss this a little bit. This was an article in The Ecologist, the same publication that did these guys, wherever I can find them again, and it was good reading. So they're talking about they said it's not just a paper, but a living body of research and social inquiry. And I would like you to read this for yourself, guys, if you can. It is read Is Deep Adaptation Flawed Science? And then they go through action and complexity, nuance, interests, science, and the dig break. They talk about how it broke new ground and change, good science. And this guy, it was an interesting article in The Ecologist. And the next one I have is another quick one, which at this moment I can't. All right, I moved it. So let me get everything back up. Can you see it okay? This one was another response, and this was by 4 different scientists. And they wrote, Deep Adaptation opens a necessary conversation about the breakdown of civilization. And I guess the reason why I'm spending time on this again was because I felt that we not a closing in this. And I suspect that maybe there won't be for a little while, because I was called out. You know, I don't like call out culture. I don't do that. And if someone, again, I can repeat this from the beginning, you have a critique, it's a good thing. I don't always want to hear, oh, Sandra, you're great. I don't. I like critics. I like critiquing, positive critiques. And if you know more than I do, I am a willing learner. Don't be ignorant. Don't be a phony like that person in the beginning who made up the name, who did that, who made up a phony name. And, you know, I mean, come on. We're grown-ups. We're adults. You don't do that stuff. I think it's bullshit. So I'm going to go to the next one, and that was Open Democracy, same publication. And they also talk about the science background of deep adaptation that evidently this, you know, people think I don't understand at all. You know, how can I possibly? I'm just a moron. How could I understand? Well, you know, I guess if you surround yourself with people that understand, I guess I'm not such a moron. In this article, they argue that the science behind the possibility of a global collapse is robust and shows how this idea should be taken seriously. And they give names of it. And so they call it collapsology. They published a book. Now, remember, this is a team, How Everything Can Collapse. The book was a bestseller. All right. So what are the risks? Can we predict their occurrence? What tools and methods are used? How did past societies face them? Are they inevitable, or should we plan and prepare? So really interesting, because they go through these tenets of how to do these things. But what we highlighted in our academically supported reviews is that these aspects of collapse could happen in our lifetime for the present generation. Could. Not saying would, but could. Above all, our aim was to inform as many people as possible what scientists and institutions are saying about these little considered hazardous scenarios, so everyone could get moving and society can organize itself politically to mitigate these existential risks. Now that is, you know, if that's even possible. But they said, you know, understanding the subject lies in the subtlety of the notion of uncertainty and the paradoxes it generates in the current situation. Guys, we are not going to be business as usual. We're not going back to business as usual. It will never be. Coronavirus, ecocide, everything. We're not going back to business as usual. But I do want to show you the rest of this because I thought that it was interesting. Collapsology. Then they go down and you really ought to read this when I finish, because they talk about the recommendation of the IPCC and the pandemic. But the next one in collapsology came the and they do have a book, Another World and Another End of the World is Possible, Well, they did actually have the first question emerges because almost everybody finds themselves running on a perpetual treadmill of emotions, including anger, fear, sadness, grief, and guilt. Like I said in another live stream, I probably go through the 5 stages of guilt 5 times a year, but I come out of it. I'm not stuck. I move through. Yet, according to Will Steffen, the science of global warming has failed spectacularly to emotionally connect with much of society, particularly those in powerful positions, rendering policymakers ineffective despite repeated warnings. So, many critics of collapsology and now deep adaptation often assume they do not use scholarly insight in their assumptions. And we argue that fear, despair, or rage are always and will be present. They have to be part of the action to make you take action. So, maybe that's just I'm refuting that. I don't think people that are understanding of what's happening are just going to sit back and watch Netflix. I believe, like I am, people are doing things. And all those people out in the streets that with the kids with the Sunrise Movement, all of them, they're doing things. And so is, Extinction Rebellion. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. I don't know very many people that don't say to get active and do something. I don't at all. So they go through a lot of stuff in this one. And I want you to go down. I wanted to find the other one. So what about deep adaptation and the need for care and action? Our generation must lead on 3 fronts simultaneously. As Rob Hopkins and Joanna Macy say, we must lead with our heads, hearts, and hands. Understanding, here it is, what is happening. Collapsology, imagining and believing in other worlds, and finding courage, collapsosophy, as well as gathering living forces to build alternatives and lead the fight against destructive powers, collapsopraxis. Deep adaptation helps us in this task, so we should be careful with unnecessary divisions in the climate movement and move forward with deep adaptation, and obviously with all other voices from scientists caring about our future. I liked that one too, but I think you guys got to read the whole thing. And let's check in on you in the chat. I see that you guys are talking. You're talking about John Lennon. I hope I'm not boring you. I hope you're interested in my topic. I'm still going to keep going. What is going south? Don't just do something. Sit there. Right. And Jennifer Elizabeth, stand up. And we all do. I drive around. And that was another thing. Like, I don't know what XR is. Of course I do. I drive around in my truck in this redneck area I live in with a big old Extinction Rebellion sticker on my truck. And most of the time, I think that they all think it's a rock band. I have no idea. And yeah, I'm still here, Ed. All right, so I'm going to go on because let's see, we have some time. Okay. I wanted to go on and show you just a couple of more things. Food for thought. It'll all be in there. I hope you guys look at what I put in there for you. This is just saying, okay, all right, we're not changing. We're not collapsing. We're just what? Everything's fine. It's not. And I know the guys didn't say it in that article that everything's fine. But do you know, I have been saying, what have I been saying? That where I live, it's hot as hell during the day. And then we get these crazy thunderstorms in the afternoon like Florida. And I hate Florida. And I don't want to live in Florida. And now the New York Times is reporting sultry nights and magnolia trees. New York City is now subtropical. Winter is warmer and summer is sweltering with torrential afternoon downpours. What's next? Palm trees? So even the mainstream media is noticing and showing this stuff. I mean, what are we on the precipice of? Some kind of ecological collapse. Extinction for what? Humans in the future? I didn't say yesterday, tomorrow, sometime in the future. Doesn't mean you're not going to mobilize. Doesn't mean you're going to sit back. But it was interesting, that new species are thriving in the metropolitan area, while those more associated with New England are slowly vanishing. Yeah, it's changing because of rising temperatures, the result of human activity. Can we stop it? Do you think that there's the political will to stop this? That's the whole thing. I know Extinction Rebellion is pressuring. They think they're going to do this, but I'm not going to be a naysayer. I'm all for everything that is being done. And I don't want to be a naysayer. I just look at the geopolitical happenings going on around the world. I see that protesters are being arrested and tear gassed in our country. We're doing what China's doing to Hong Kong. I just don't see that right now in this particular part of history that civil disobedience is working, but you got to keep trying. And I guess one example is in Portland. Once the thugs from the federal government came, the unnamed thugs left, Portland's been having peaceful demonstrations every single night. So it can be done. It's just the law enforcement people have to stay out of it. Because peaceful demonstrations and civil disobedience are not going to hurt anybody. They are going to teach people. So I'm segueing. I know I'm segueing. I've been on quite a while, but there was another article, and instead of going through all these articles, I'll show them to you. Freedom in the Age of Collapse. And then the BBC, it was done when to talk about deep adaptation, the climate doomers preparing for society to fall apart. I don't know. It doesn't look too bad for what she's doing. I'm doing the same thing, albeit maybe not as able-bodied as she is, but we're planting, we're doing all that. And I have a greenhouse, and I have water catchment things, and we're doing all that too. So it's not so bad. I don't think it's a bad thing. But the article goes in and is it just because of Jem Bendell that people are starting to go off grid? I don't think so, but Michael Mann calls it pseudoscientific nonsense, his paper. But I don't know, and he still does? I don't know what Michael's afraid of. Michael, you're a brilliant guy. What are you afraid of? People have to change their lifestyles, Michael. We can't have it the same. You can't live the same way, Mike. His doomist framing is disabling and will lead us down the same path of inaction as outright climate change denial. I don't see it happening like that. Not at all. I don't know. And it is not the level of science of the anti-vax campaign. One bit. All right. I'm going on because I have to say that this is a wonderful way to get involved in something. And I am working on getting an interview with Margaret, who runs the climate mobilization, who came up with the climate mobilization, Margaret Klein Solomon. You will see her. She will be on. And I have done this for years. I've told you about their page and their stuff. It's an emergency restructuring of modern industrial economy accomplished at rapid speed. It can happen if we have the political will. It involves the vast majority of citizens, the utilization of a very high proportion of available sources, and impacts all areas of society. Well, I just ordered Margaret's book. I didn't have it, but I had always been interested in the climate mobilization because I think I think it's phenomenal, and without regard to the end result, guys. Okay, so we can build the pathway to a regenerative future? Well, maybe we can. Who's to know how long that future is? A climate mobilization effort means not only preventing the unimaginable suffering from climate and environmental catastrophe, but also working to reinvent the economy to address the social inequities. And you get it, phase out. Can we do this? Well, I could say no. I could sit there and say to you, there's no freaking way we could do any of this. Look at the way it is in the world. Look at capitalism. Look at neoliberals, blah, blah. But I always say, why not try? Hey, you may be surprised. And that is going to lead me to one more. Oh, no, I already showed you that. This is going to lead me to some other things that I'm going to end with. And I'm going to go back to me. I'm going to pull them up. And I really want to read you 3 questions. Well, this was a Stuart Scott quote. And it was, there is not enough time for us to waste precious time in angst. And how about how there is not enough time. Correct. Pessimism is a luxury we can't afford. No time for it. So when you're thinking that maybe things are pretty bad and maybe WASF, you don't necessarily have to be a pessimist. You can be an activist. Jem Bendell. These questions invite exploration of deep adaptation to our climate predicament in order to develop both collapse readiness and collapse transcendence. Collapse readiness includes the mental and material measures that will help reduce disruption to human life, enabling an equitable supply of the basics like food, water, energy, payment systems, and health. Collapse transcendence refers to the psychological, spiritual, and cultural shifts that may enable more people to experience greater equanimity towards future disruptions and the likelihood that our situation is beyond our control. What is wrong with that? I suggest you check out Michael Dowd and Carolyn Baker. And I'm going to end with the piece de resistance from our friend who gave me permission to read this, Kent, and I found it on the second video on Scientists Warning, and I thought it was worth a read. Kent is a great follower. He is one of us and, one of the family, and I'm going to give this to you. I'll be Kent. While it is natural to move from despair to hope, one must always account for the delusionary characteristics of hope. We engage in wishful thinking when we use hope as a foundation to ground our expectations. This is an important aspect for movements, as a collective hope is the favored outcome when orchestrating efforts to change how society functions. Now, it seems to me that many of the people at Deep Adaptation have much longer life experiences than those 2 hopeful young men who wrote the story that we've been talking about. People who, as they point out a great deal of grief over failure to preserve what we once had. The young adults of this moment have no framework from which to evaluate the loss already felt by people just twice their age. The young will never know this grief, but will find them in their own time. The one fella makes a great point about working with that grief, for that is what is required. One cannot, however, require that people manage their grief well, but we should allow people to deal with their grief in their own way. One way people are doing that is through deep adaptation. I find these attempts to deconstruct it as missing the point of movements such as Extinction Rebellion. It would seem like avoiding extinction is the point, one the IPCC shares. We are required to believe that extinction is possible, even probable, if we are to take anything about our situation seriously. So first, that truth. Extinction. Is it possible? Not just is possible, but is the feature of life on this planet, with 99% of all life that existed having gone extinct already? Okay, but is that probable, as in happening on a time scale where people born now may not live a full natural life? Okay, but the answer to that one is yes, but may depend on where on the planet that person is from now. That extinction is not limited to humans. So do we see life being extinguished around us at a rate falling into a category that we call extinction? Oh yeah, and then some. Over 200 species a day. End of last year, we can add 2 vertebrae per year to this list. Okay, so extinction is possible and probable. Great. But does that mean we are powerless to affect the future? Hell no! And we should be doing everything possible to create the opportunities for life. We are not engaged in doing. We are engaged in talking about doing. So what's going on here? Do these young lads have a plan? What I am hearing is that they are focused on shouting down people that are their teammates in this. You'll not find people more eager to adapt than at Deep Adaptation. There is more an effort to stand apart, to differentiate in order to gain appeal to a wider audience, which is in itself is fine. No problem here with setting out yet another new platform for the public at large. I would question the fellows on what sort of strategy they have and wish them good luck. No one has really taken to defining this collapse thing. We could say that by definition, properly addressing a global heating is about shrinking our carbon footprint in line with at least the guidelines of the IPCC. So quickly may be the word many use, but let me suggest that the speed at which we must attain zero emissions and the onerous on a part of that being the next 8 to 10 years defines a state of collapse. For instance, much of the industry that is heavy on carbon emissions must disappear in a few years. International shipping must stop, but only for the most crucial of items, while we retool our local areas to manage the day-to-day needs. Plastic production from oil must be halted immediately, and hemp-based plastics can be geared up to replace them eventually. All fossil fuels, like the tar sands in Canada, only oil that is easily attained, as in Saudi Arabia, can be brought to market. This must happen as soon as possible. So with just a taste of the actions needed, one can only say that we must collapse our world into a very small space. Much of what exists must be gone in a year or two. Well, fortunately and unfortunately for us all, we have a pandemic that is partially facilitating that change. We have been presented with a golden opportunity to make up lost ground. We won't get there arguing over whose version of collapse is correct. It seems ironic that at this time the discussion at all, as the collapse is underway right now, my fear that people will simply fail to respond is being borne out in real time. Imagine the debates had in houses and on the streets of Pompeii. Well, look around, folks. The world we knew is gone. Some folks are going to be trapped in their grief. That is part of the process. Some folks will be trapped in anger, unable to forgive the failings of the past. It could be that a whole host of people never make it out of denial. What we need are people that have managed to process the current state of affairs and are prepared to act accordingly.
I would encourage these young men to engage with solving the real problems and leave the low-hanging fruit for others. If deep adaptation is in some way a threat to their moving forward, I don't see it. There is no controversy here, no meat, just sauce. Thank you, Kent. That was really, really good. And we have been on an hour. And I am so happy that you let me read that. I'll look at if there's any comments or any questions. Nothing? Well, I want to thank you, everybody coming and listening. And thank you, Ken. It was really good for you to let me read that. So guys, have a good night, and I'll see you on Thursday. And don't forget Sunday, we have Debo Zarko. I'm almost 100% sure. And subscribe to the channel if you're not, and like the channel. And we will be having the coffee cup conversation shortly, because it really is pretty. And everyone should have one. Thank you. Peace out, guys.